गुड मॉर्निंग स्टूडेंट्स। आज हम करेंगे निसीम एजिकेल की पोएम अ टाइम टू चेंज, जिसकी की टेक्स्ट पहले ही मैंने एक दूसरे वीडियो में अपलोड कर रखी है। आज हम देखेंगे इसकी एक्सप्लेनेशन। ये जो पोएम है एजिकेल की अ टाइम टू चेंज, इट इज़ the very first poem of his collection, A Time to Change. In fact, this poem is the nucleus of all the poems or all the studies on the poet. The poem shows poet's immense passion for the body, God, and poetry. All the three things are there in his poem: passion, spirituality, as well as creativity. In fact, these three things are the major constituents of self as well as Ezekiel's poetry. उसकी पोइट्री में आपको ये तीन चीज़ें मिलेंगी: पैशन symbolized by body, God, and a desire to write poetry. In fact, this poem is a combination of secular, religious and personal elements. The epigraph of the poem is taken from Revelation 4.6. Now this is Revelation is a part of Bible, and this epigraph, it serves a useful purpose because we find that in the poem the self of the poet is highly tortured. बड़ा परेशान है उसका सेल्फ. The self of the poet is conscious of his sexual desires and desires of flesh or body. In fact, the poem begins on a note of exhaustion. ओपनिंग में ही बड़ा थकान है स्पीकर को. ही इज़ डिसइल्यूजन्ड. In fact, if you recall the first two lines, the poet says, "We who leave the house in April, Lord, how shall we return?" He is skeptic कि हम जो अप्रैल में घर छोड़ रहे हैं, हम लौटेंगे कैसे. He is not very hopeful. And if you remember, April is considered as a month of regeneration. You must have read the poem of T.S. Eliot, where he says that April is the cruelest month. So the poet begins the idea of a journey, of a voyage, and he wants to discover the music of life and meaning of life in this journey. But in order to acquire the true commitments of life, the poet does not philosophize things, but he begins with the earthly love or the physical love. We find that the poet or the protagonist in the poem, he is on a quest, he is on his journey. किस चीज़ की जर्नी है? यात्रा पे जा रहा है. हम जब यात्रा पे जाते हैं, वी गो फॉर सम गोल विद सम पर्पज़. So what is the purpose of the poet or the speaker? He wants to find out his roots, he wants to find out his moorings, but before doing so, he also calculates his weaknesses, and there are a number of weaknesses. He is aware of his weaknesses. He says that we are debtor to horse of love, we are corrupted by so and so things, we have rehearsed desires, and the question is, how shall we return? How will we get redemption? In fact, the poet or the protagonist is able to identify that this result this awareness of loss, वो कहीं भी आपको खुश नज़र नहीं दिखाई देगा. आपको एक सेंस ऑफ लॉस महसूस होता है पोएम में. तो ये जो सेंस ऑफ लॉस है, अगर आप इसका रीज़न ढूंढने की कोशिश करें तो द पोएट, वो जो कवि है, वो खुद ही कहता है दैट वी आर नॉट कंसंट्रेटिंग ऑन थिंग्स. He says that this sense of loss is a result of incomplete absorption, and this incomplete absorption is considered to be the failure of pilgrim. If we consider the poet as a pilgrim who is on his journey, so his incomplete absorption or his inability to concentrate on his goal leads to his failure. Now this consciousness that his concentration is not complete, that his absorption is incomplete, it makes him unfit. He says that we are unable to discover the city's freshest brides. And he results on a conclusion that chastity, concentration of body and mind, a passion beyond the physicality will help to fulfill his commitment. This craving, this desire, craving means desire. Now what does he craves for? He craves for a bit of land, a woman, a child, means family. Now this materialism or physicality, this desire is unattainable, because if you indulge in physicality, you cannot attain spirituality. If you go towards spirituality, you have to leave the physicality. Okay, so all these things, which one? Physicality, desires, materialism, they corrupt the pilgrim, they corrupt the voyager. Now it is remarkable to note that the poem strikes a beginning of poet's commitment. You somehow come to a conclusion that poet is committed. He is committed to complete his journey. There are certain obstacles in his journey. So if you look, you will find that this poem, it revolves around the idea of pilgrimage and the vocation of poetry. कहीं ना कहीं सेंट्रल आइडिया है पोएम के अंदर पिलग्रिमेज का, एक जर्नी का, एक यात्रा का, और साथ की साथ क्रिएटिविटी का, हाउ टू राइट पोएट्री. Now this journey may be journey of becoming a good poet, this may be a journey of life, this may be a journey to achieve redemption, but you will find that here the self of the poet is like Prufrock. आपने टी.एस. एलियट की पोएम पढ़ी होगी, जे. अल्फ्रेड प्रूफ्रोक. So we find the self of the poet, it's dwindling like Prufrock. He feels that he is unable to do anything. So you can say that the poet is on his journey, but he finds that his involvement is incomplete. This incomplete involvement, it brings the sense of loss, it brings the sense of failure in life. But for the poet or for Ezekiel, this is not the failure of life, this is the failure of his journey, this is the failure of his quest. Why does the poet fail? Because the poet is conscious of his sins. वो उसको अपने अंदर बहुत सारी कमियां दिखाई देती हैं. That he is attracted towards physicality, he is involved in materialism, he is a womanizer, and the poet feels that he will not be able to find a city as fresh as brides. Now this city as fresh as brides is a symbol of new and pure creation. The poet feels that he has failed, he will not be able to create anything new and pure. Now these words, cities fresh as brides, or new orchids, or unimagined seas, all these words, they imply his search for pure poetry. his search for redemption. So you can say the theme of the poem is pilgrimage and vocation of poetry. The poet is on a journey. This may be the journey of life, this may be journey of redemption, and this may be the journey of writing a very good poetry, some real and pure poetry, some new poetry, which the quest for poetry or the quest for redemption, it is incomplete because of the weakness within the poet. So all these ideas, they constitute the summary of the poem. In case you have any difficulty, if in case you are not clear about any point, you can leave a comment. Okay, so we'll be doing some next topic in next video. Till then, thank you.